Firstly, let's think about fair trade through the ages. This reading was produced by the Fair Trade Foundation. We've all become much more aware in recent years of just how much trade matters to our daily lives. We've become very aware of just how many jobs, government policies, the goods we buy and services we enjoy are linked to trade, both here in the UK and in countries right around the world. We can think about trade in at least two ways. Firstly, trade is a way for everyone to have better lives. Without trade, we could not eat bananas or drink coffee. Without trade, many jobs would simply not exist. Trade is cooperation and partnership that helps us all. The second point about trade is that it is a tough business. Negotiations are hard fought. No one wants to come out with a bad deal. To arm wrestle successfully in trade negotiations, you need big economic and political muscles. So when trading with poorer communities around the world, it is right to ask two questions. First, who's got the power, or if we like, who's got the biggest muscles? Second, are those we trade with opponents and competitors, or friends and partners? Let's think about the situation for cocoa farmers, and in particular, the Ivory Coast, the world's biggest cocoa producer, also known as the Côte d'Ivoire. 4 million people across Côte d'Ivoire grow cocoa, much of which comes here to the UK. And yet, shockingly, 60% of all cocoa farmers live below the United Nations poverty line of just £1.47 a day. Who has the power in this trading relationship? It isn't the farmers. So now we're going to meet some fair trade cocoa farmers, played by myself and Jane. So here's a very quick introduction. Fair Trade Fortnight starts on the 9th of September 2024, and we're going to meet some fair trade cocoa farmers and find out more about the challenges they face. But first, we're going to imagine travelling back in time. We're travelling back thousands of years to the time before Jesus was born, and imagine what it might be like to be poor at that time. So we're going to meet Puabi and Ninos, a couple who might have come from Assyria, an ancient country which covered places like Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq today. And Jane is going to come up and bring the reading with us. So Jane, would you like to come and sit next to me? Because then we can both be seen on the camera. And if you would just like to put it there, we can both read.
I shall be Puabi. Right. My name is Puabi. I was born in Assyria into a very poor family. My husband Ninos and I have never had any land of our own. We've always had to go from place to place looking for work.
Okay, I can see it. And I'm going to be Ninos. It's a hard life, ours. You never know from day to day whether you'll be offered work. Even when you are hired for the day, the farmers cheat you as often as not.
They pay you late or not at all. If we're not paid fairly, we don't have enough to eat. Many a night we've gone to sleep hungry.
They understand, but they don't care.
But it's better since we came to the lands of the tribes of Israel, as they have a law which says that workers must be paid a fair wage and paid on time each day.
That's true, it's better here. They have other laws to protect foreigners like us because it's part of their religion. It's strange because my people have fought wars with them over the years, and we follow the god Baal, not the God of Israel, but they still treat us fairly. Thank you, Jane.
Very well.
In the Old Testament, Moses was given a set of rules by God, including laws to protect poor people and foreigners. Here is one of those rules which could have made a difference to people like Puabi and Ninos. Do not take advantage of a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether that worker is a fellow Israelite or a foreigner residing in one of your towns. Pay them their wages each day before sunset because they are poor and they count on it. That's from the book of Deuteronomy. The law would have been hard for people to follow. The farmers who had to pay their wages were often very poor themselves. Ninos and Puabi also followed a different religion, and many times the tribes of Israel fought wars with neighbouring countries. Although it could have been hard, the rules that Moses wrote down said that treating everyone fairly, whatever your differences, was an important part of serving God. Now let's come back to the present day and meet a farmer called Abroti Tano Florentin from the Côte d'Ivoire in Africa. Côte d'Ivoire is the biggest grower of cocoa in the world. If you have eaten chocolate, you will probably have eaten cocoa, which was grown there. So these are some extracts from an interview that Abroti gave to the Fair Trade Foundation back in 2019. My name is Abroti Tano Florentin. I am a cocoa farmer. I am married and I have 6 children. The cocoa prices are disastrous. You end up after costs with around £811 for the year. When a farmer gets up in the morning, they are always worried. How will they be able to feed and take care of the family? How will they send their children to school? It is going to be difficult to pay for their school and medical care. A child needs protection and rights. Before, this protection didn't exist, but now with fair trade, the situation has improved. A child is entitled to have access to education, health, protection, and food. When Fairtrade spoke to Abroti, he was especially worried about climate change. Before, there were a lot of forests, the rains were regular, and the seasons were well divided. It was easier. Now we don't know anymore when we should plant and when we should stop. Climate change has an impact on crops, which results in less money and food available. So let's hear some final words from Abroti. Now we are in the Fair Trade project, we have access to training. Someone who is trained is someone that can decide. So today, the training that Fair Trade provides gives us knowledge about plant diseases and how to improve the productivity of the crops. There are 5 million farmers in the Ivory Coast who suffer and struggle to survive. There is no minimum income. If someone does not have the money to survive, what can he do? If the situation does not change, I think people will stop cocoa farming because the incomes are too low. If the consumers are satisfied but the farmers suffer, the future is very uncertain. What do we notice listening to Abroti? Perhaps we understand better how hard it is for many farmers who grow food that we eat every day. 60% of all those cocoa farmers in Côte d'Ivoire live below the United Nations poverty line. Although it is now thousands of years after the time of the Old Testament, it looks as though it matters just as much today that we treat the people who grow our food fairly, even though, like Abroti, they might live far away in another country. Did you notice Abroti explaining how fair trade had been improving things? When we buy fair trade chocolate or other products, it means that extra money called the fair trade premium goes to the farmers. Fair trade helps in other ways too, supporting farmers with training and advice. That all happens when people like us choose to buy fair trade. Changing things for cocoa farmers in Côte d'Ivoire is not easy and will take time and effort, but we can all help. We can think carefully about what we buy and whether it has been produced fairly. We can share stories of Abroti and other cocoa farmers with our friends and neighbours to encourage them to choose fair trade. And we can pray for ourselves and all the people around the world who grow our food, who make our clothes or produce other things that we consume. I hope you've enjoyed briefly meeting Abroti this morning and also our Old Testament friends, Puabi and Ninos. I thought it would be good to hear a bit about Newcastle's fair trade history, and I'm now about to possibly shock Brian by asking if you wouldn't mind terribly coming up and reading a little bit here. If you want to sit here and read the bit called Fair Trade Pioneers, and so I'll just do a little bit of history whilst you have a look at that. I've been involved personally with fair trade for about 10 years now as part of Newcastle's Fair Trade Partnership. We've been a fair trade city for 21 years, which we're about to hear about. And there's actually quite some interesting fair trade history. So Brian, if you would just like to read the section called Fair Trade Pioneers, and then I will talk a bit about our status as a fair trade city.
Fair trade pioneers. Did you know the fair trade movement began in Newcastle? In 1974, the first shipment of jute handicrafts was brought back from Bangladesh by fair trade pioneer Richard Adams. He began to sell and distribute from his basement of the appropriately named India House on Carlisle Square, Newcastle upon Tyne. From small shoots, big trees grow. If you are fair trade savvy, you will know that this small business soon grew into Tiercraft and later developed into the hugely successful Tradecraft, with sales of over £100 million today and over 12 million per year. Tradecraft, despite its success, has stayed within the region, and since 1985, they have been based in the Team Valley Trading Estate, Gateshead. Tradecraft goods are sold in Newcastle through the One World Shop in St Thomas the Martyr Church, Haymarket. Perhaps as a result of Tradecraft's success, Newcastle has become a hub of fair trade activity, as various independent fair trade businesses have sprung up on Tyneside. Among these is Ethical Investor Shared Interest Society, that in 2010 celebrated its 20th anniversary. Based here in Newcastle, but with offices in Costa Rica, Kenya, and Peru, Shared Interest pools money from its investors to lend to fair trade businesses in the developing world. I didn't know I was going to read this, but I remember when you opened that shop down Carlisle Square, eventually they expanded to like street level, and it was he had the first rickshaw I'd ever seen out of wherever. So he had that in the window. Thank you.
And here is a bit about Newcastle's fair trade city status. It might be obvious that this was written a couple of years back. Unfortunately, Tradecraft is not trading from Gateshead anymore, but there are still quite a lot of fair trade shops and businesses in and around Newcastle, including us, because we are a fair trade place of worship. So here is a bit about Newcastle's fair trade city status. Elsewhere in the country, many businesses, schools and organisations began to give their support. The Fair Trade Foundation instigated the Fair Trade Towns initiative, which gave local communities the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment in a high-profile way. In 2000, Garstang in Lancashire was granted the title of the first official Fair Trade Town. John and Audrey Marshall had been fair trade supporters for over 30 years, and when John became the Lord Mayor of Newcastle in 2002, fair trade was always going to be high on his agenda. So it took a bit of time to do this, but seeing great potential in the city, in April 2002, 3 years before I came to Newcastle, John launched a campaign to make Newcastle a fair trade city. To test public opinion, a petition was launched to the public to pledge support for fair trade. The support was overwhelming, with people actually queuing up to sign it. In a bid to win the title, a formal fair trade steering group was set up, and that steering group still exists. Local councillors, campaigners and business representatives formed a group, and those present committed themselves to the target of achieving Fair Trade City status for Fair Trade Fortnight in 2003. The first meeting was held in Lord Mayor's chambers. To qualify as a fair trade city, Newcastle needed to have a certain percentage of fair trade retailers in the city's boundaries. The steering group had huge support from local businesses, which meant that before the end of 2002, the campaign was well ahead of target. In February 2003, Newcastle was announced as the world's first fair trade metropolitan borough, or fair trade city. They held a celebratory dinner, which was enjoyed by everybody there who had supported the campaign to be a fair trade city, and included 2 visiting Ghanaian cocoa farmers. So that's a short introduction to our history as a fair trade city. Newcastle still holds that status, and as of this year, we've been a fair trade city for 21 years, and I hope we'll continue to do that in the future. So with that in mind, I would like to ask Norman to come up and read a prayer.
As I enter the street market, wheel my trolley at the supermarket, leaf through a catalogue or log on to the internet, be with me and help me when I spend money. Be with me and help me to see the marketplace as you see it, as wide as the world you love so much. Be with us and help us to share the markets we share for all people as we live under your steady gaze, so we can change by your gracious love. God of love and justice, we give thanks for the gifts planted in all of us. We remember the power we embody when we share these gifts, the compassion and understanding, the fire and the vigour. We honour your word living within us, inspiring people to protest at greed, to work for justice, to passionately share their resources and cherish all life. Yours is the outspoken love. Yours is the outrageous hope. Yours is the extravagant mercy. So to you be the honour and the power and the glory. Amen.
So, as an introduction to our next reading, which David is going to do, it's worth noting that Fairtrade Fortnight this year is happening between the 9th to the 22nd of September. And it's actually going to celebrate 30 years of the Fairtrade mark. Most of us will have seen the Fairtrade mark if you've ever seen Fairtrade products. It used to look like two Fs, but now it resembles a blue and green circle. So with that in mind, that piece of history, David, if you would like to do your reading.
2024 is the 30th anniversary of the Fairtrade mark in the UK, marking 3 decades since Fairtrade certified products first appeared on the supermarket shelves across the nation. The first, Green and Black's Maya Gold chocolate, was launched in 1994, followed by Cafe Direct and Percol coffees. I think I remember Percol coffee.
You can still get it.
Can you? All right.
If you look really hard.
And Clipper Tea, of course, which you can still get, I think. There are now almost 5,000 Fairtrade products in the UK alone, and the number is growing all the time. Globally, millions of farmers and workers in 70 countries are part of the 1,930 Fairtrade certified producer organisations benefiting from stable prices, community facilities such as education, healthcare and clean water, which Fairtrade has funded, access to training, and a platform for their voices to be heard. Since Fairtrade was launched 30 years ago, more than 600 towns and cities from all over the UK have signed up to support its mission. Nearly 2,000 Fairtrade groups have sprung up in universities, communities, and places of worship, while tens of thousands of children in Fairtrade schools are learning about trade justice for the farmers and workers who grow their food. MPs contacted by their constituents have asked questions in Parliament, launched early day motions, and put their names to the petition calling for living incomes. Fairtrade Foundation Chief Executive Officer Mike Gidney says, "We are incredibly excited to be able to mark this very important milestone. Fairtrade is all about building a fairer future for people in low-income countries who grow and make the things we rely on every day, our food, our clothes. 30 years on, we estimate that 10 million people, including farmers, workers and their families across Africa, Latin America and Asia, benefit from sales of their products on fair trade terms. Of course, there is still so much to be done. Our world is perhaps more dangerous now than it was 30 years ago. The climate crisis, global insecurity, rising costs, and long-term low pricing continue to threaten farmers' futures. This matters to us all. Even while we celebrate the achievements of the fair trade movement and the inspirational commitments of campaigners, communities, and companies alike, we are as ambitious as we were on day one to bring the benefits of fair trade to more people. In 2022 alone, sales of fair trade products in the UK generated approximately £30 million in fair trade premium for farmers and workers to invest in business and community projects of their choice, including healthcare, education, and environmental initiatives. More important than ever, given the global cost of living crisis. As the earth heats up, farmers in the low-income countries now urgently need to fund climate change adaptation to protect their livelihoods and crops. The 30th anniversary year will see the Fair Trade Foundation campaigning for farmers to earn a fairer price, receive a greater share of power in supply chains, and access the financial resources they urgently need to tackle the climate crisis. Richard Padilla of Emperor Ban Coop, a banana SPO in Colombia, I don't know what an SPO is, but it's in Colombia, said, "I couldn't run my farm or have a viable business without the fair trade price and premium. Production costs are so high at the moment, and I'd struggle to be able to sell internationally. With climate change on top of everything else, I wouldn't be able to meet requirements on my own. Thanks to the fair trade premium, I've been able to send my son to university. I now live in a proper house. Without fair trade, my son and others couldn't have continued their education." Sadiq Abanga, a fair trade cocoa farmer from Ghana, said, "We have officers to give us training and education, bonuses from the premium. Whether you are male or female, you have a choice." 30 years of fair trade.
Thanks, David. Changing the world one chocolate bar at a time. Maybe. When I prepare services, you might be interested to know, I sometimes make a list of things which I'm not going to do or mention. If anyone wants to know, for this service, it was, don't just make it a lecture, because we are here for our spirits. Don't just make it about coffee and chocolate, although we will have some coffee and some chocolate biscuits at the end. And don't tell that story about throwing starfish in the sea again. I like that story, but we've all heard it a lot. Also, I can't really beat Winnie Gordon's rendition of it from a few years ago. So, as I said, the Fair Trade Mark is about 30 years old this year. And I've been involved in supporting fair trade for about 10 years now. Through my work with Newcastle's Fair Trade Partnership, I do sit on the steering group. And one of the responses we keep coming across is fair trade still going? Perhaps that's a mark of success, in that fair trade is in a sense part of the background. I'm reminded a bit of the old quote about the problem that Unitarianism has. The problem is we won the argument. When your entire reason for existence was to provide a space for religious freedom in the face of conformity, and suddenly society thinks that's totally normal and it's you who are the weird ones for going to church on a Sunday, what are you supposed to do? I actually think that, as with Unitarianism, fair trade is in the position of having to win the argument all over again. I think because it's been around for so long, it has rather faded in the background. But as we've heard, fair trade is still very much needed. Part of the reason I mentioned the story about the boy throwing starfish back in the sea is because shortly before I started preparing this service, I was producing the service video for the Whitby trip. You might remember back in July, Unitarians from across Yorkshire and the north gathered for the annual gathering at Whitby. And there was a service there led by Claire Lee, who's a worship leader there. I've just finished up actually doing that video for the benefit of people who couldn't make it this year. So I'll be sharing that online soon. I'm mentioning that because part of the service we heard there was about the work of the Send a Child to Hucklow charity. Sue Katz was present. If you know Ralph Katz, she is the former partner of Ralph, if you think you're recognising the name. She is a trustee of Send a Child to Hucklow, and she talked about their work to send children in need to the Nightingale Centre in Great Hucklow in Derbyshire, where they can spend time in nature. And for some of them, that's the first time they'll really have had the chance to do that. You might remember back in May, I did a service called Hucklow Bears, which is about the work of that charity. Sue recounted how she once had someone say to her, "Sue, is it fair to give these children a glimpse of something they can't really have?" To the collective indignation of everyone present at the service. I'm going to be a bit controversial and say that I can actually see that person's point. I don't think they were right, but I think all of us who engage in any form of social action sometimes wonder, is this actually worth it? Am I changing anything here, or is this just a token gesture? Is Fairtrade a token gesture? I don't know. Can we actually change the world one chocolate bar at a time? As someone who's supported Fairtrade for years, I don't think you'll be surprised to hear me say that I do think Fairtrade is special, because unlike many such schemes, there's lots of them around, branded on coffee, cocoa, lots of different things, tea, sugar, you name it. Unlike many such schemes to support better farming conditions for both farmers and the environment, it does work to actually give power to the people who produce goods. We heard in our readings today, especially the reading David had, about how the Fairtrade Premium gives producers financial resources so that their children can go on to higher education, so that they can do work to protect their homes and their farmland from the effects of climate change, which is only going to be more important, that protection, in the coming decades, I'm sorry to say. And I do think that matters. I think it matters in a fundamental way, because one of the biggest criticisms of our current economic system is that it doesn't really value people, human beings, as people, only as production units. And I think we see from our very first reading that this is one of the oldest human moral struggles. As far removed from our world as the world of the author of the book of Deuteronomy is, we can see in the wording of the extract, "Do not take advantage of a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether that worker is a fellow Israelite or a foreigner residing in one of your towns. Pay them their wages each day before sunset, because they are poor and they are counting on it." I think we can see the recognition that we're all human. Whoever wrote that clearly saw that it doesn't matter whether a human in need is an Israelite, one of your own tribe, or a foreigner. They understood that if a person is hungry and in need, they need that money to buy food and look after their families. Much later, Jesus would teach in the parable of the Good Samaritan, love your neighbour as yourself. And I think we're all familiar with the idea of the golden rule, that most religious, spiritual and philosophical traditions arrive at the same fundamental principle of treating people the way we would want to be treated. Whether you phrase it as we're all children of God or we're all alike in human dignity, we are all equally human and equally valuable. And I do go back to that comment by that unknown person about send a child to Hucklow. And I'd like to make two observations about it, one challenging, one hopeful, or so I hope. The first is that comments like that, I think, should be a bit of a prod to all of us. Perhaps that person did mean what it sounds like they meant. These kids will never break out of their lives of urban poverty, so why make them miserable by showing them something they can't actually have? But perhaps also, I think that should prompt us to think, why is it so unlikely that the children helped by Send a Child to Hucklow can't have a world in which they have the same access to nature as children from more affluent families? Why is it that we in the richer world, sometimes called the global north, are in a position to help others by buying bars of chocolate? I think that we should ask that. I think that following a spiritual path in life demands it. When we think about great spiritual leaders, be they Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, or many others, you won't find conformist in any description of them. They came to change and challenge society, and I think that radical spirit is needed. I hope we never shrink from that challenge. My second observation is, I hope, more hopeful, which is that I think fair trade shows us how we can take steps on the way. It shows us that partnership between those who, by accident of where we were born, have more, and those who have less, can lead the way forwards. And when we again think of those great spiritual leaders, I think it's striking how all of them wanted to build a community. They wanted worlds founded on equality, on divine love and truth and compassion. And I think also of the limits on what we can predict, but also of how acts of solidarity can ripple beyond what we might see. Who knows what inspiration a child at the Nightingale Centre might take from experiencing nature in a way they've never managed to do before, and how it might inspire them. Who knows what impact being able to access education might have on the child of a fair trade farmer, or on that farmer themselves. It's never too late to learn and change. Buying a fair trade chocolate bar, or a fair trade rubber glove, or a fair trade wedding ring or smartphone, because it's amazing what you can get fair trade these days. I'm not going to claim it can fix the world on its own, but it's a step on the right way, on that way to changing to being the one world we all want to live in, where we all have an equal place at the table. May the spirit of fair trade live in us, and let's all strive to see that better world. And I hope it may be so. As we go forth from this place, we think of how you created a beautiful world for everything living. As we taste and smell and enjoy the fruits of the creation, help us to remember those who farm the land to grow them. Help us live in a partnership of love and support with those who produce our food and drink, so that we might enable others to feed their families and create the sustainable future all of us want to see. May it be so. Amen.